fáilte Reverend cúpla focail ará faoin lasú seo don mBunreacht agus ceapan bhfuil sé tábhachtach agus éontaim leis ach tá mé búta faoin míú atá an maidir le commerceáid maidir leis an durability agus tucha mé ais go dtí sin. I agree with the Minister who said that the constitutional position remains that Article 41 does not apply to unmarried couples, and that's a dreadful situation, and I totally agree with you in relation to that, and it's something that we have to change and must change. But let me say at the outset, the manner in which has been done with the limited time, I agree with Deputy Breach-Smith. It smacks of seizing the opportunity on International Women's Day, which we will celebrate anyway. And I would prefer to get the wording right. I'm fully supporting you on the need to change Article 41. Absolutely, that the definition of family would be broadened out to reflect the complexity of Irish society. In fact, Irish society was always complex. However, we give no recognition to that, and anyone that fitted outside the norm, we locked them up. And that phrase keeps coming to mind, Professor Smith, in relation to the mother and baby homes and the Magdalen laundries. It was the architecture of institution, wasn't it? That's what women mostly lived with, the architecture of institutions. So in one sense, it's not that life has got more complex. It was always complex, but we choose not to recognise that. And anyone that stood outside of that, we locked them up, whether it was in a mother and baby home, a Magdalen laundry, an industrial school. And then within the Constitution, we enshrined restrictive language, how the family was based on marriage, very specifically based on marriage. But importantly then, it went on to give protection to that marriage. And I agree with that. I think marriage should be protected. However, it's the definition of marriage that needs to be broadened. So I welcome that. However, I think the time span for allowing, unfortunately, pre-legislative scrutiny was waived. It should not have been, to fit into a time span so you could get your moment in the sun on International Women's Day, and I don't agree with that. The definition needs to be teased out into what you're saying. What is, how do we include as many people as possible? And I don't think this wording captures that. But before I come to that, in terms of complexity, and again, from reading the mother and baby homes, the amount of children born outside marriage, I don't have the figures to hand. I wish I had, because they were always quite high. But again, we choose to ignore them. But the figures we have for more recently, Copperfassen, how life has changed and how many children are born within what is a protected marriage under the Constitution, and then in other relationships that have varying protection under the Constitution. And if we look at the number of marriages alone, there was a total of 23,173 marriages, both opposite and same-sex, and that is also a huge leap, a progress, opposite sex in 22 compared with only 17,217 in 21. But it's the figures in relation to how many children are born outside of the protected constitutional provision, which they're really significant. The number of families with no children saw an increase of 11% since 2016. The number, that's without children, and an increase of 14% compared with 2011. So it's given us a taste of the complexity of different families with children, without children, children born outside marriage. The number of same-sex couples increased by 157% compared with 2011. And in 2022, it stood at 10,393. And since 2016, the number of cohabiting couples without children living in private households went up by 17%, more than twice the growth rate of married couples. And again, we're not given enough protection to cohabiting couples, and there is discriminatory systems in being in relation to various aspects from social welfare to inheritance. The married children, children within marriage is still the most common type of family unit. However, while I'm going to go into the table, married couples with children, while they rose by only 2% cohabiting couples with children increased by nearly 13% in the same period. And all of this is set out in the digest given to us by the library and research, which I want to thank. They work under awful pressure, and they produce these digests for us to give us a background always to what's going on. And I recommend them to every TD because they really, really give a good background. There were 57,540 births registered last year. 57% within marriage or civil partnerships, and 24,754 outside of marriage, and so on, showing a trend all of the time in relation to the increasing complexity of Irish life. Again, I'm uncomfortable saying that, really, because as I've said, there was always complexity. So what I'm really saying is the recognition in a positive way of the complexity in Irish life. That is progress. So I welcome this amendment. I do not welcome the limited time within which to discuss it, and that's particularly in relation to what we're describing as a relationship outside of marriage, and I think that requires a lot more debate in relation to the word durable. I don't mean to be facetious, I don't mean to be argumentative, but I have the greatest difficulty with the word durable. If I take it on a personal basis, in my own experience, I might apply durable to one particular relationship and not to another that was much longer than a shorter relationship. I don't know that word, and I think it needs to be teased out. It should have been teased out at pre-legislative status, but it wasn't, and now it's going to be done at committee stage, which it's not really the place to do it. I've sat in that chair last night and watched amendment after amendment. I'm not crossing boundaries into my other role. I'm simply talking as a TD in relation to the amount of amendments that come forward at committee stage or at report stage, which make it absolutely impossible for democracy to work, really, or for TDs to do their job. And this was a perfect example. It's a very short bill. It's a very brief change to the Constitution, but we have the term durable. And let's look what the Supreme Court said, and I could quote many cases, but this is the most recent one in relation to a case which I don't need to go into. On the term durable, Judge Baker said, durable does not mean permanent. See where we're into now. Durable does not mean permanent. And a test that requires permanence in that sense would be an impossible, burdensome hurdle and would not be in accordance with any modern understanding of intimate relationships. Now, I agree this is in a different context, but they're actually looking at the word durable. Yeah. A different context, but relevant. Absolutely, but we'll come back to that, you see, in relation to legislation. I'll come back to that. But it's worth looking at the word durable and what the issues it has raised here for the Supreme Court. What is meant, it seems to me, is that the relationship be one which has continued for some time, again, very vague, for some time, and to which the parties are committed, which is slightly better, commitment, with an intent that the commitment continues. Well, I could have an intent that I'm going to continue with my relationship. I might change that intent tomorrow, and so on, and it goes into all that. And then in paragraph 75 of that judgment, duration, therefore, is an important factor, but not always an essential one. Durability is not measured only, or even always by durability, but by, and it goes on, and I mean, finally, what do they say? Should the proposal to amend the Constitution be approved by the people, it would be for the legislature and the courts to decide. So I know I'm selectively quoting, and I know it's in a different context, but it's really to just illustrate the word durable is going to lead to serious difficulties in interpretation. So if we go back then, and I'll finish on this in relation to the family, I am welcoming this change. I'm welcoming that we're broadening out the concept of what the family means, because that's the most essential, that's the most basic thing that we might do in a republic in the 21st century. But what does it encompass? Does it encompass single mothers? I know you're nodding, but I've looked at enough case law to know about interpretations of law. I'm no expert, but I've read enough to know that different words lead to different interpretations, and indeed the restrictive definition of the family in the Constitution has led to lots of judgments that I disagreed with them. One that was already mentioned, a Teaghlach case, an adoption case, where a very strict interpretation was given to the family. So I suppose it's too late to say, let's stop this ridiculous time of the 8th of March on International Women's Day. I'm on your side. I agree with you that the Constitution should be changed. I agree with you that a definition should be broadened. I do have difficulty with the word durable, and I would appeal to you to allow sufficient time for that to be teased out, the implications of that, bearing in mind the court cases today in terms of the interpretation of legislation.